Hey guys, it's Abby from Pellinor, and today I am doing my March reading wrap-up. This was a lot. This was a lot of reading to do in 1 month. So, let's just get straight into it because we don't have time for this. So, the first book that I read, Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. Now, if you follow my channel, I have been reading this in like segments for a little while now, and I've been getting through bit by bit each month. And I intended to get through the orange segment, you can see here. Decent size. I sat down and read 500 odd pages of it in one day, and then finished the book. Didn't mean to, not the intent, intended to just read the orange, which would have got me to like here, but I finished it. So this is the memoir autobiography of Nelson Mandela's life. It goes through from his childhood all the way up till the point when this was published in, I believe, sometime like around my birth year. I was born in 96. 94 is when it was first published in the UK. So up until that point in his life, so this was basically from birth to president? Yes. Or whatever the official name is for South African leaders, sorry. This is such a good book. It's so good. So of course, it's interesting. It's about the apartheid, it's about Mandela's life and the struggles and the fights that he went through, but it's also written very well. He is a good writer. He knows how to keep you engaged. He knows what points of the story are going to interest you most, whilst also still keeping the facts that are important. And this is just a fantastic memoir. I know it's a chunky read, but if you read memoirs, I really do recommend. And thank you so much to Kerry for gifting me this. I thought this was going to take me a few years to get through, you thought this was going to take me a few years to get through, and yet I finished it in March. Fuck knows how. And so, only including, I've got my little notes here for all of my page numbers, only including what I read in March, that was 539 pages. Good wee start to the month. Then, Caitlin. I read Frankenstein by Shelley. So this came in at 226 pages. This is a classic that follows a man named Frankenstein who is kind of an amateur scientist who creates a living monster. He creates life out of nothing, and this then haunts him for a variety of reasons, and like stuff happens. I'm keeping it vague because one, obviously spoilers, but two, I knew nothing about this book going in. I knew the stereotypical green monster with the bolts in its neck and the fact that Frankenstein was the scientist and not the monster. I was surprised by a lot of this book. I had no idea what was going on. But it's really, really good. I can totally see why this is Caitlin's favourite. Thank you so much for gifting this to me. And I really enjoyed this. I read it a lot faster than I thought I was going to. It's a really readable classic. I will say, in terms of this specific edition, I like the floppy, as in I would stop in the middle of reading just to, and then continue. But I don't like the notes that are in the back of the Oxford edition. So because I've been reading War and Peace, I'm very used to checking the back for every single notation mark, and a lot of these were silly. They were things that, okay, right, no. They were things that I thought were silly, and I was like, well, of course that means that. What else could it have meant in the context? So I will say, if you're not a native English speaker, that's probably really great because the contextual clues aren't going to work the same. And also if you are somebody who struggles more with context clues, or somebody who is new to classics or new to kind of reading in this manner, the Oxford editions could be very helpful for you. For me, it just pissed me off. Which I know is bad, but like I'd see the little note and my brain would be like, go check it, and I'm like, no, because it's not any fucking use. And then I would inevitably give in and go and check it and then be annoyed because it wasn't anything that I hadn't already assumed from the book. There were a couple of points that were useful, one or two. The ones where I was looking and I was like, okay, if they've told me something that isn't just context clues for this, I want to know what it is. And once or twice it told me. Be aware that that's what's in this, like these Oxford Worlds classics. Oxford Worlds classics. So yeah, if that's something that you're looking for, I recommend this. Pick it up. If it's something that's going to annoy you, be forewarned. because oh my god, I'm so annoyed. But yes, Frankenstein specifically, I ended up giving this 4 stars. Caitlin, don't kill me, please, don't come to my house and stab me. But I did enjoy it. I did, I promise. I really liked the character development. I really liked kind of seeing Frankenstein through his life, as I adjust my brush up. Frankenstein through his life and his family, and how this impacted his view on the world around him as well as the people around him. And I loved the narrative aspect. I didn't know going in, I said, didn't know anything. This is actually kind of narrated, so at the beginning and at the very end, because Frankenstein's telling his story, we're actually speaking to a sailor in the Arctic trying to reach the North Pole, and he comes across Frankenstein in the Arctic and he's like, the fuck is happening? And it goes from there. Oh, I did give a star rating for the Mandela book. 5? How am I meant to rate this anything other than 5? Then next up with 255 pages is Borrowed Time by Naomi A. Alderman. This is a Doctor Who book, if it wasn't completely obvious, and I read this for the buzzword-a-thon. The buzzword was time, so ta-da! This is a fun little book. It follows the 11th Doctor and his companion Amy and Rory. It is linked to the TV series, but this wasn't actually an episode, so they are separate. And we follow a world where you can have essentially a time vortex on your wrist, and it lets you borrow time, and so there's this bank that's using it. As if you wouldn't figure that. There's this, loads of employees at this bank are using it because obviously in banking environments you always want to be one step ahead, you always want to have an extra 5, 10, 20 minutes, hours, days. And so all of the employees are using this, and they've not really noticed the negative aspects, but some people have disappeared, some people have died, and the Doctor comes in and is like, This is a lot of fun. I have read 2 of these Doctor Who books so far. The other one was Touched by an Angel by Jonathan Morris. I'm not getting it down. And these are fun. They're enjoyable. I'm pretty sure I gave this 3 stars. I really like the concept. I think it would have worked great as a TV show. I'm kind of mad that it wasn't. And I like Naomi Alderman's writing because she's also the woman that wrote The Power. And I knew I enjoyed that. So yes, an enjoyable little book that I'm glad I finally picked up because I've owned this for a while now. Isn't that the theme? Not really, because next up with 350 pages is a book I got for Christmas. 2020 Christmas, it's just gone. Look at me reading my books. So this was gifted to me by the wonderful Dom. Thank you so, so much. This is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. It is a sci-fi book which follows Asta on a spaceship, and this spaceship is segregated with the black population being on the lower decks and being forced into sharecropping essentially, and the white population being on the higher decks and living like kings and queens and royalty and courtesans and all of that. But it's on a spaceship, and it's sci-fi and it's like futuristic, and basically they left Earth because something happened and it wasn't inhabitable anymore, so they went off to go find another planet. And Asta has questions because her mum disappeared just after her birth. Like, she's just gone. They assume dead, never found a body, and it's kind of, how the hell do I describe this? I mean, the last sentence of the synopsis is, if she's willing to sow the seeds of civil war, which is like, kind of obvious sci-fi plus racism equals like, fuck you, of course. Rivers Solomon is officially now one of my favourite writers. Their writing is beautiful. I read The Deep last year by them and it was fantastic. I adored it. I gave this 5 stars. I was speechless. I was speechless! Hello? This is just fantastic. It's written beautifully. There's so much representation in here. None of it is specific to myself, but as far as I can tell, it's done really beautifully, and as far as I know as well, which was from research, it is Rivers' own representation and identity, so of course, even if it isn't done well, it is accurately representing their life experience, which I thought was beautiful. I love the interpersonal relationship between all of the different characters and how everything played out, and it's just absolutely stunning. It's a beautiful book, and I 100% recommend picking up anything by Rivers Solomon. I'm 100% going to be reading everything they ever publish. Then coming in at 319 pages is Other Words for Smoke by Sarah Maria Griffin. I was gifted this by Charlotte when she ended up with 2 copies, and so she sent me this like 3 years ago and I finally read it. Thank you, Charlotte, I'm so sorry. And I buddy read this with Kerry. So many links. This was gorgeous and weird and ethereal and so good. So, I mean, if it wasn't obvious, An Unkindness Ghost got 5 stars. I'm pretty sure there's also got 5 stars. It's on my core pile spreadsheet. I cannot remember, but I'm pretty sure I got 5 stars. This follows one set of twins. Right, so May and Rossa are sent off to go live with their great aunt because their parents are getting a divorce, and it's like a whole thing, and like they're just trying to get them out of the house. This is also set in Ireland, by the way. So they go off to live with their great aunt Rita and the kind of like her young ward Bevan. The great aunt was friends with the mum's just kind of skipped town, so Bevan's just kind of living there. And there is magic. So as I'm trying not to spoil it, so that's why I'm using the synopsis. A cat who was more than a cat, and a dark power called Sweet James that lurked behind the wallpaper. So it's a lot about people kind of having their darkest desires realised in a negative manner, how you can't really just trust things on surface level. The camera cut out. I've lost like 3 minutes of me nattering. To simplify this massively, witchy, cozy, tarot, cat, owl, magic, Ireland, fantastic, recommend, 5 stars. Which is basically what I said, but just in a more rambling form. Next up with 376 pages is Reckoning by Kerry Wilkinson. So I wasn't sure when I picked this out of my TBR jar last month as to what age range this was in. It's definitely YA, it's a YA dystopian, and there are some good and some bad. I'm going to start with the bad, so bear with. Bad is our character is named Silver for the silver streak in her hair, and there is 100% a love triangle in book 2. It hasn't developed yet, but it's there. I'm fully aware it is there. And like, However, what I will say is that I really like how this was done. Despite the stereotypes, despite the kind of, the tropes that are used, I think it's enjoyable. And if you just want like a standard YA dystopian that's fun, then I recommend this one. So this is a society where at the age of 16, children, teenagers, do a test that no one can describe quite the same. Everyone describes it differently, and it determines their level in society. They're either a trog, an inter, a member, or elite. And then out of those groups, a certain number each year from different areas around the UK, I think it might just be England, probably just England, maybe including Wales, I don't know. I can't remember exactly how much had been conquered and how much hadn't. But they are all, there's a certain number of them that are picked to go live with the king in the king's castle, and they're never seen of again, and it's kind of assumed that they're like doing like dignitary work, or they're being like married off for alliances and things like that, and it's an honour. The family back home gets extra food rations for the rest of their life because you've been like taken, and you never see them again. And of course our main character Silver is one of those. Of course. In this world as well, there has been a war. The king stopped the war. He came along just at the right time to kind of prevent this continuing on. Life before the war was essentially what we know. Life after the war is your typical dystopian world where people don't really get enough food and they're kind of distanced, and there's struggles, but people get by and they're just glad that there isn't a war on. And of course then when she goes and she's in the castle with the king, she knows that she finds out things aren't exactly as they seem, it's not all great. Yada yada yada, stereotypical YA, however I like the way it's done. I find it very interesting. It's also quite dark. Possibly look up some trigger warnings for this one. I am so bad with trigger warnings. I'm trying to get better with that. It's relatively dark. It's not like uber dark, but it's like, oh shit dude. So yeah, this is enjoyable. I'm definitely, like, I already own book 2 and I'm gonna be picking it up. So I'm glad that I finally read this one. I'm very grateful to the jar. For making me finally pick this up because I've owned it for years. Wait until I read book 2 to see what I think about the series, but so far book 1 is like a good standard YA dystopian. I'm not mad. I'm a little mad. Silver hair, silver streak called Silver, little mad. But and then next up with 351 pages is Skullduggery Pleasant Playing with Fire by Derek Landy. This is the second book in the Skullduggery Pleasant series, and I am reading this along for the... what the hell is it called? I'm going to be in the live show. Okay. Okay, right. So I was reading it along because basically I watched some of the other like people who are joining in with the live shows and stuff. I watched their videos and they were reading it and I was like, I want to read it. So that's why I read Skullduggery Pleasant last month and then I read Playing with Fire this month. You guys know I love this series. A very quick overcap. Alright. So we follow a young girl who is 12, 13 in the first book, who then ends up meeting this magical skeleton detective in this magical world in Ireland, and they kind of do their shit and like go on from there. It's fantastic, it's funny, it's stupid, it's technically middle grade, it's very, very dark for middle grade, and the live show for this, where we discuss it, will be on the 10th of April, so if you want to tune in, make sure to do so. I'll post links on my social media and things like that. This was an obvious 5 stars, I adore this series, you guys know that. And I will also say, because I think this is the last one of the two, is that it was also the Irish-a-thon this month, so St Patrick's Day was within this month, and there was a readathon on, of course, to read as many Irish authors as possible, even if you just read one Irish author I counted, and I read 2. So Sarah Maria Griffin, Irish, Derek Landy, Irish. So I'm going to be reading one Irish author every month for the rest of the year, so like, go where I want you to go. We love a good Irish author. Now for the last book that I've actually finished as of filming. Today is the Monday prior to the end of the month, so I need to finish the rest of these in the next few days. I will do it, okay, but the last book I've actually finished is The Mask Falling by Samantha Shannon. So I finally read it. I read this for Tone Topple, which is read a book that's over 500 pages within 2 weeks. I managed that I finished it last night, so I did manage to get that within there. This only just fits within Tone Topple. It's 514 pages, including like a glossary and like a recap of characters. So I kind of cheated, but also this was the best thing to kind of make me actually pick this up. It was fantastic, it was amazing. I've been screaming about it to people. This fucked me up, okay? This fucked me up. Like, I can't say anything because it would be a fucking spoiler because this is book 4 in the goddamn series, but oh my god, Samantha Shannon, why? Like, there was a thing that happened like here-ish and I was like, that ain't it. I know you're lying to my face. And I was right. But I also would have known I was right, even if I hadn't been told that by the end of this book. And so many things happened, and I'm so confused, and I don't know what's going on. This is the 4th book in the Bone Season series by Samantha Shannon. It's a series where, with clairvoyance, and a dystopian world, and a fantasy world, and high technology, and it's fantastic. It's an adult fantasy. There's a lot of trigger warnings for this series, especially once you get to book 3. There's trigger warnings prior to that, 100%, but book 3 is where it kind of like doubles down. However, if it's something that you can read, I really recommend. This series is fantastic. Although so there's 2 negatives. One is the trigger warnings. Obviously you can't read it if you would be triggered in a way that means you can't read it. But 2 is that I've noticed that with Samantha Shannon's writing you either love it or you hate it. So I would recommend like giving the first, like either the Bone Season or Priory, which is a very big book, but either the Bone Season or Priory a try, or you could read, I think The Pale Dreamer as an ebook is free, or like 99p, and On the Merits of a Naturalist is free, but that doesn't really explore her writing style. So if you can, maybe The Pale Dreamer and give that a shot. If you are okay with her writing style, continue. Read them all. Buy them all. If you don't, you probably won't like her books. She's quite divisive within her kind of writing style. However, if you like it, you're gonna fucking love it. Next up is for a book that I haven't finished yet, but I will. And that is 288 pages for How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates. I always forget the name of this. So I got this from NetGalley. I picked it up because they sent me the email and I was like, huh, how am I meant to not read this? So obviously at the minute I'm like 4 or 5 chapters through, so I don't know everything so far, but it is a non-fiction work, just Bill Gates kind of talking about different aspects of climate change, how we can mitigate, how we can react. It's very interesting. It's definitely written in a conversational style. Bill Gates isn't an author. I mean, of course he is now an author, but that isn't his profession. It's very much him just speaking to you one-on-one. However, it does still include all of the figures. It does still include a lot of different statistics, and as far as I can tell, everything looks accurate. I haven't completely fact-checked everything, but this is something that I have studied myself for my undergrad, and it matches up with everything that I did there. So I haven't fact-checked the exact figures, but I would be very surprised if Bill Gates didn't have it accurate. And it's interesting. It's really interesting. I like looking into it from his point of view. Obviously my point of view is very environmental with my educational background. His point of view is a lot more economical and computerized, mixed with environmental, because he's not an idiot. And so yeah, so far it's really, really interesting to see his thoughts and how he thinks we should best kind of combat climate change. And that's going to be useful for me in my head, because obviously I have the arguments from the environmental point of view, and they aren't necessarily the best to use, because yeah, sure, I think, why don't you do this, why don't you do that, but in reality the world's economy controls everything. So having his point of view kind of in my head and being like, yeah, that's great, but like, no one's going to do it, what about this? It's going to be really useful, just for me. Yes, for other people who aren't the same as me, I think it would be great to kind of just have this kind of very casual one-on-one chat, but with really accurate and scientific information about climate change, just to kind of let you know exactly where we're fucking up and how we're fucking up, because we are fucking up pretty badly. And he does focus on the important elements, so he focuses on, of course, like the consumption of fossil fuels, but also manufacturing is like the main issue is industry, okay? And the man goes into this. So yeah, this, so far, it's not gonna be, well, I could be wrong. At the minute it's not a 5-star read, but I'm less than halfway through, but it's definitely a very good and interesting insight into kind of how we're going to tackle climate change, and I do recommend picking it up if you are at all interested. Then next up, this is now moving on to the sections of books. So I was previously reading Long Walk to Freedom in these sections, but I'm still reading Fall of Giants and War and Peace in bits and bobs. So first up is Fall of Giants. I read 101 pages of this month. I have 2 chapters left to read of this, and then I will have reached the 101 pages. I am enjoying this. I'm definitely a lot more invested in all of the different characters and quite interested in how things are playing out, and just, as far as I can tell from what I already know, it's quite historically accurate, so that's really interesting as well. There was, at the very beginning, one point when I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because I thought, there's a character who is cheating on their partner, and I mistook this character for a different character, and I was like, so the fuck are you doing? The fuck are you? No! But it wasn't, it was another character who was already a disgusting cheat, so it's fine. Yes, 101 pages of this. I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would. I'm glad I'm going through it section by section. Progress! And then the last book is War and Peace. I have read 115 pages of this month. Well, again, I haven't done it yet, but I will have. I'm buddy reading this with Olivia from Olivia's Catastrophe, and we are really enjoying it. So we are now into book 6. We won't have finished book 6 by the end of the month, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We will have finished book 7 within next month and go into book 8. We are a decent way through, considering we're not reading that much each day. It is set to be 638 pages in total by the end of the month, which is decent. We are enjoying it. Things are developing. I know that Caitlin from Manchester Rabbit is reading the entire thing in 11 days, or at least is attempting it. So she's like here, and I'm mad. So fuck you. Because she's further ahead in it than me. So yeah, if you want someone's actual full review of the finished book, I recommend going and checking out Caitlin's March wrap-up, because I'm sure she'll mention her thoughts in there, whether she manages to finish it or not. Again, pre-filming, who knows. And I'm not picking them up because, can you even see all of them? No. But I'm not picking them up because they're heavy, but those are! The books that I read in March, I was struggling at the end of the month, if you couldn't tell by the fact that I haven't finished everything so far at this point in filming, and I've only read my actual TBR. So next month I'm definitely reducing down the TBR. I'm not going to read the same amount of books. I need to take a step back and realise that at the moment this amount of reading is a bit too much, what with like full-time work, applying to jobs, you know, doing all of these, playing far too much Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing. Can't do all of them, so I'm reducing the amount of reading I'm going to be doing in the next few months, but in total I read 3,434 pages, which is fucking awesome. I'm very pleased. And now I'm going to go and actually finish that climate change book. So thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know how many books that you guys read last month, this month, in March. Let me know how many books you guys have read in March, and if you've read any of these and what you thought of them yourself. Thank you so much to everybody who gifted me all of these wonderful books, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!